The story is narrated by Huckleberry Huck Finn, a young boy living in St. Petersburg, Missouri, along the Mississippi River. Having acquired a large sum of money from his previous adventure in the adventures of Tom Sawyer, Huck is being raised and civilized by the widow Douglas and her sister, Miss Watson. Huck enjoys his wealth but grows restless under their strict rules and religious teachings. First, Pap's return and escape. Huck's abusive alcoholic father, Pap, returns to town to demand Huck's money. When Huck refuses, Pap kidnaps him and locks him in an isolated cabin in the woods. Fed up with his father's violence, Huck fakes his own murder by slaughtering a wild pig, spreading the blood around the cabin, and escaping down the Mississippi River in a canoe. Second, meeting Jim on Jackson's Island. Huck hides out on nearby Jackson's Island. There he runs into Jim, Miss Watson's slave. Jim has run away because he overheard Miss Watson planning to sell him down south to New Orleans, which would permanently separate him from his family. Although Huck struggles with his conscience, since society has taught him that helping a runaway slave is a sin, he decides to look past his conditioning and promises to help Jim reach freedom. Third, the journey down the river. The two find a large timber raft and begin traveling down the Mississippi River. Their goal is to reach Cairo, Illinois, where the Mississippi meets the Ohio River. From there, they plan to take a steamboat up the Ohio River into the Free States, where Jim can legally be a free man. However, a heavy fog causes them to miss Cairo in the dark, forcing them to continue floating south into the dangerous territory of the Deep South. Along the way, they experience a series of episodic adventures. The Grangerfords and Shepherdsons. Huck gets separated from Jim and is taken in by the Grangerfords, an aristocratic family locked in a deadly, bloody, multi-generational feud with another family, the Shepherdsons. After witnessing several family members die in a brutal shootout, Huck escapes back to the raft and reunites with Jim, the King and the Duke. Huck and Jim rescue two con men who hitch a ride on their raft. The men introduce themselves as an English duke and the rightful King of France. The King and Duke take over the raft, forcing Huck and Jim to serve them as they travel from town to town pulling scams, such as the fraudulent Royal Nonsuch theater performance, and attempting to steal the inheritance of the grief-stricken Wilkes family. Huck's moral climax. The con men eventually betray Huck and Jim. Desperate for cash, the King sells Jim to a local farmer named Silas Phelps for $40. When Huck discovers Jim is gone, he faces a massive internal conflict. He believes that by helping a slave escape, he is going against God and will go to hell. He sits down to write a letter to Miss Watson to tell her where Jim is. However, he stops to think about Jim's kindness, loyalty, and humanity. Huck tears up the letter and famously declares, "All right then, I'll go to hell." He resolves to rescue Jim no matter the spiritual cost. The Phelps Plantation and Tom Sawyer. Huck arrives at the Phelps Plantation to rescue Jim, only to find out that Silas Phelps is actually the uncle of his best friend, Tom Sawyer. The Phelps family mistakes Huck for Tom, who is expected to arrive for a visit. Huck plays along. When the real Tom Sawyer arrives, he agrees to help Huck pretend to be a cousin, Sid Sawyer, and assist in freeing Jim. Instead of just sneaking Jim out of the shed quietly, Tom insists on creating an elaborate, theatrical escape plan, styled after the romantic adventure novels he reads. This unnecessary plan delays the rescue and puts everyone in danger. During the eventual nighttime escape, Tom is shot in the leg. Jim refuses to leave the wounded Tom behind, sacrificing his chance at freedom to ensure Tom gets medical attention. Jim is captured once again and locked up in chains. The resolution. Tom is brought back to the plantation to heal, and he finally reveals a crucial secret. Miss Watson had died 2 months earlier and set Jim free in her will. Tom only kept the escape a secret because he wanted the thrill of the adventure. Pap Finn is also revealed to be dead. Jim mentions that a dead body they had seen in a floating house early in their journey belonged to Pap. With his fortune intact and Jim legally free, Huck is faced with the prospect of Tom's Aunt Sally adopting and trying to civilize him. The novel ends with Huck deciding to head out west into the Indian Territory to escape civilized society entirely. Major themes: racism and slavery. Twain exposes the hypocrisy of a white Christian society that legally and morally justified the enslavement of human beings. Intellectual versus moral conscience. Huck's intellectual conscience, what society taught him, tells him Jim is property, but his true moral heart tells him Jim is a friend and a human being. The river versus society. The Mississippi River serves as a symbol of absolute freedom, peace, and brotherhood. On the raft, Huck and Jim are equals. On the shore, they are forced to deal with the corruption, violence, and prejudice of society.